Hello and welcome to another episode of Be the Love to Awaken Our Souls. Thank you again so much for tuning in this week. I'm Stacy Musial.
And I am Brenda Carey with our special guest, Dr. Joel Bennett. We are your co-hosts and souls on the journey, and we are on a mission to raise the consciousness of humans and the planet, and we need your help. Please spread the word to your family and friends and join us every week. Consider becoming a Patreon supporter or a sponsor to help with the operating costs like editing and the many hours we spend creating these shows with quality guests and content. And if you have resonated with our mission, support us in a way that raises your vibration to love.
And if it feels safe for you, I'd like to begin to take a moment to get centered with us. I'd like to begin by inviting you to take a beautiful cleansing breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, releasing anything that is keeping you from being present. And take another deep breath in through your nose, breathing in calm, peaceful, loving energy, and breathing out anything you are ready to release in this now moment. And take one more breath in through your nose, breathing in light and love for yourself. And imagine breathing that light and love and send it back to all of humanity. And remembering that you always, always have your breath to come back to.
Our guest today is Dr. Joel Bennett. He is president of Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems, known as OWLS, a consulting firm specializing in evidence-based wellness technologies to promote organizational health and employee well-being. Dr. Bennett first delivered stress management programming in 1985, and OWLS programs have since reached nearly 250,000 workers across the United States and abroad, including training over 1,000 facilitators and coaches. He is a primary developer of team awareness and team resilience, which are evidence-based culture of health programs recognized by the U.S. Department of Health and Surgeon General as effective in reducing employee behavioral risks. In 2022, Dr. Bennett was acknowledged with the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Wellness Institute and internationally with the Positive Leadership Award from the Positive Leadership Institute. Dr. Bennett has authored and co-authored 7 books, including Raw Coping Power, Heart-Centered Leadership, and Your Best Self at Work. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Joel.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. I am really curious, how this journey of yours started. What has your spiritual path led you up to this point?
Well, it's always, people ask that question, in time, in linear time, there's one answer, and then there's the outside of the linear time answer. The linear time answer, and I talk about this in Quest for Presence. I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and I became aware, laying in bed at night, that my body was going to end. I became just vividly aware, like I can sense that I was going to die. Not in that moment, but just the awakening consciousness that my life has only so many years to it. But it wasn't a cognitive, it was somatic. So immediately I can feel what I have no other word for other than the void, just the void. So of course, I'm freaking out. I go to my parents, they're laying there in bed. I tell them what's going on, and they go, "You're too young to think about these things. Will you go back to bed, please?" And so that's it. You asked me where it started. That's where it started.
It's quite a profound memory for such a young boy.
Well, yeah, it just goes on from there. It's been quite a journey. So I'm grateful to be here because what you guys are doing really resonates with what's needed in the world. And what I especially love is that you both, and correct me if I'm off here, that you each have your own independent work. So when you do your podcast, you say, "Hi, I'm Brenda. This is what I do. Hi, I'm Stacy. This is what I do." And here you are coming together,
Mm-hmm.
with common dialogue, and that's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how normal that is. You know what I mean? Most people have their own podcast, their own thing, and there's less of that you don't see that collaboration as the norm.
Hmm.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. And
I don't think Stacy and I are all that normal, but we'll take it. Yeah.
normal is overrated, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we like to create the deeper conversations, and it's a fun, to really collaborate and build that relationship, with each other and then with our guests and provide that common vision. So
Yeah, it's not the content is, of course, wonderful, and yet there's another message here by virtue of the fact that you give each other the space and you have the space, and yet there's something else that's emerging out of the openness to that dialogue. And I think there's so much out there. I don't mean to contrast it for the effect, but that's spirituality to me, creating that space where we can investigate together, as opposed to, this is the way it is, this is how I see it, and these are the paths, and these are the tools, and these are the techniques, and here's the content. So to me, it's not about the content, if you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's about the maybe the message of what we're creating together, versus what we're actually saying. Yeah. And so I think, it's so beautiful, that brings me to think about, excuse me, what you talk about between time and intimacy and creating, these deep relationships and connections that we can have with each other. And I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about that in your perspective.
Well, I mentioned, for your listeners, this is a follow-up to the podcast you guys did. What was that? February 20, Radiate Your Love, right?
Yeah.
Because, I was listening to that, and you talked about healthy boundaries and discernment. And it takes time to discern. And in fact, one of you said, it's not glamorous. I forget what you were saying. There was a patient, the work of being married, I think, was, it's you didn't go into it thinking this was going to be as much work as it was going to be.
Yeah, that would be me.
Not glamorous.
No, not at all.
So this is interesting because I wrote Time and Intimacy, which is an earlier book, but in there I talk about these 4 parts, kind of like, I like using little tools and kind of like, acronyms and things like that for helping people. So, in the recovery movement, I was actively involved in 12-step programs for a while, and codependence. I identified as a romance addict, and which is you fall in love every other week with whatever you're falling in love with. And in that work, they talk about into me see. I'm sure you've heard that phrase, that okay, it's a certain healthy way of setting a boundary. Look, I get that you want me to do X, Y, and Z, Mr. or Mrs. Lover or partner, and I need to take time for what I need to figure out before I can make the next move here. And so that's intimacy, is that idea of intimacy, which is that self-intimacy, which is what a lot of what you've talked about. And being able to discern, to have the opportunity to know, hey, wait, am I just falling in love again? Am I giving myself away again? Am I doing things that don't feel resonant with me? Intimacy. And there are 3 other parts to this. It's sort of like 4 stanzas in a song, or if you will, 4 instruments in a quartet. The other one is in time I see, so that you're giving yourself the opportunity to wait with and to allow things to unfold and to not push the river, but to see what's really here for us. You know, what's here, what's meant to be here, that in time I see. That's another form of intimacy. And then the third one is you add in, depending on your karma, mates, like in time mates see. Because I think I was listening to Brenda, that the work that you were describing with your husband, which it sounded really cool. Like you guys have developed something where you work at it together and you both see over time what needs to happen next, you know, and where are we going and what should we be doing, and having a more mindful and deliberate approach to the relationship. So that's a whole nother level of intimacy. And it involves taking the time, you know. Yeah. I often say patience is underrated in our culture.
True. True. Yeah.
And then the fourth one, which gets to the spiritual, is, and I often read, I have it here, this quote, is into my sea, which is SEA. And when I came that up, I didn't know about this poem from Hafez. And in this poem, he goes, there are so many gifts still unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents that have been sent to you by God. The beloved does not mind repeating, everything I have is also yours. Please forgive Hafez and the friend if we break into a sweet laughter when your heart complains of being thirsty, when ages ago, every cell in your soul capsized forever into this infinite golden sea. And it's so powerful because that's a synchronicity for me that I didn't know about this poem. And into my sea is just into your life. You know, it's not even about the question of intimacy is like no longer even relevant anymore because you don't care. You're just living God. You know, you're just embracing love. You're just going from, like you said, you're talking to the lady at the cashier, and you're being fully present and loving to the cashier. You know, it's part of your sea, you know? Yeah. So I hope that's a quick way to kind of encapsulate the relationship between time and intimacy.
Thank you for that. I love the acronyms there. That it always helps me to have something to remember bigger concepts for. And speaking of bigger concepts, so your book of Becoming a Connoisseur of Time, and you mentioned at the beginning linear time, and then explain to us the other form of time that you go into in your book, or kind of as like a continuation of here's linear, and now what is your explanation now of this bigger perception of time?
Well, we just don't have enough time.
Right?
Let me say that. Because there's so many, there's so much research. There's so much here. It's one of the most compelling topics of philosophy and psychology and spirituality. So, not to get too cognitive about it, one way is to just ground it in the moment. That here it was, I selected that particular podcast that you guys had did on February 23rd or whatever, right? And it just, I was going through it. I thought, which one can I listen to now? And that was the one, you know? And so that's synchronicity, because it really, everything you guys talked about there really resonated with what I believe to be a core piece of this work, which is everything we just, you know, the intimacy piece. And so synchronicity is, I call it a soulful capacity. And I'm only bringing this one element in because we could talk about anyone. But synchronicity is very magical because you start to recognize, you know, Carl Jung, who many believe coined it, called it an acausal, right? It's not about cause and effect. It's acausal, meaning it stands outside of the linear cause and effect reality that we're used to. All of a sudden, something happens like, how did that happen at the same time that I was thinking this? Or, you know, the classic example, you go to call somebody you haven't talked to in 10 years and you pick up, and as you're calling them, you pick up the phone and there they are.
Yeah.
But synchronicity is happening all the time. And it's a capacity we can cultivate. So it brings us into this notion of time that's beyond our clock time or linear time. And, but it's one there are many soulful capacities. So how we come to time in the abstract sense of what's really happening, is through cultivating our soul, or if we're getting in touch with our soul. You know, it's like Hafez said, you know, hey, you know, your every cell in your soul has capsized forever into this infinite golden sea. So just forget about it and have some fun, you know, and let it go, man. And I use the metaphor of I sometimes will do this, happen here, of the hourglass. So my hourglass is getting so old that sand is falling all over the place. So, you know, you look at the hourglass and you look at the center of it, and, you know, people kind of use this as, this is the moment, right? This is it. This is what's happening now. That's the past. This is the future. So we talk about be here now as kind of like being at the convex of the hourglass. And I say in this work, what we're doing is recognizing that it's not just about be here now. It's like stepping back and like, be here for the whole of your life. Be here for the whole time of your life. And so you're expanding your consciousness to recognizing that you have a past, you have a future, and we can get too caught up in the moment. We can get too stuck in the now. You know, be here now is also overrated for that purpose, because look, I mean, we have climate change. We're fucking up the planet. You know, whatever I'm going to say here, you can delete my language.
It's all good.
Yeah. But you see, my point is that we haven't learned anything other than clock time and be in the moment. So we have to recognize that there are other forms of time that are operating on a much larger scale. And the best way to do that is to look at our life. You know, in grief recovery work, there's an exercise and we talk about it. And, you know, I'll stop talking because I want to make this a conversation, but you can respond to any of these points I'm making. You create a timeline of your life from birth to death. And on that timeline, you put significant events that have happened to you, and in particular, losses, right? The death of someone or the loss of a pet, and then you reflect on what impact that has had on you. So you're looking at your whole life, and you're starting to recognize more or less your mortality. And it's being willing and able to do that work, I think, is what's going to help us heal the planet. So a whole time perspective rather than a be here now clock time perspective.
So it sounds like really zooming out beyond the now and but looking at everything. Would you say that's looking at, well, I guess you're looking at your whole time, your whole life all in one, recognizing that you have from point A to point B, which is kind of linear, but you're also expanding outward. So you're expanding, recognizing, you're, like you said, your mortality. And then I'm wondering, kind of within that, flowing with this idea of time, and as you're zooming out, how, like, recognizing and trusting the synchronicities that are flowing into your life, and that when you're actually able to connect on a soul level in the experiences that you're having, and maybe not getting attached to those, being, connected to your linear mind humanness, but creating the space to flow with what is, when you're in alignment with your soul's path for the whole.
Exactly. I may have been you in the No, you got it. It was in the podcast. It may have been you who said, what happens when people don't return your phone call? And how you might go off the rails, wondering what it was that you did when you call people and they're your friends and you thought you had a relationship with them and you're being ghosted. And you said, I think it was you said something like, that's the point where you tune in to your self-esteem and start to do that inner work, which is not just about letting it go, but also having this recognition that now may not be the time for this to happen, and to trust just like you said, to flow with it and to trust that process. So it's the same thing that you were just talking about, except in the context of relationship and love relationship or friend relationship. I could, oh man, being a romance addict is hard. What happens is you get rejected. I'm speaking in the third person here to kind of just make it easier. You get rejected, and then you go to your dorm room for 2 months and sulk, because you're afraid to be out in public, because you're afraid that your self-esteem will get hurt again. And it's, being young and in love, whatever that means. I hope that was fitting there, because when you're not old enough, you can't do what we just said. There's no way you can do that. It's like, he left me. Or you spend hours listening to all these songs on the radio that basically perpetuate the pathology, and there are hundreds of songs. So anyway, it takes a lot of time to cultivate this flow with the circumstances.
I know it's taken me years, and to and then to switch it inward. Like, what am I doing to co-create this experience, and being able to flow with that and do that inner work. I know when I was 16, I wasn't thinking inner.
No, I don't think any of us were.
We could talk about men and women and the differences there too.
So, I mean, you're talking about, I love how you got romance as an addiction. How does time play with other forms of addiction. I'm curious, like someone who struggles, whether it's more of a substance addiction or an emotional addiction, or because I feel like this is something very real for people, like because they just feel either there's this time scarcity mentality where there's all this anxiety around, I don't have enough time to do all the things that need to get done, or I'm wasting my time doing these addictive patterns and I can't get out of it. Like, how does this role of time as you see it really help people kind of shift out of their whatever addiction that they might be struggling with?
It's another way that I came to this work, because you asked me how did I get started on this path, and so I want to bring it back to make it real. I grew up in a home where there was alcoholism and other forms of abuse, if you will. And it was only when I started to recognize that my intense attachment to women at that point in my life, as a younger man, was keeping me from living my life, from being actually healthy. And so there are many different ways to answer this question, but I'll start off by making, again, the frame, in the connoisseur of time, I make the distinction between the connoisseur and the addict. So the connoisseur takes their time to cultivate an attitude of savoring and of looking at the nuances of things. Whereas the addict is, I want what I want and I want it now. And, there's no nuance at all. As I said in the book, a friend of mine who was a bartender can tell the difference between a connoisseur and an alcoholic when they're at the bar, I mean, it's pretty quick. So time right there. And so there's so many levels. There's a physiological level where we know that addiction sets up certain dopamine circuits or in a brain where the craving gets to be so strong that one at level, they can't go without it. And we know from the brain research that if that happens when you're before 21 years old, or it's much harder to recover because you're doing it at a stage when your brain hasn't fully developed. So addiction, that's why all the money is being spent on prevention with, children and adolescents. So at the physiological level, at the psycho-spiritual level, as a 12-step person, when you're working the steps, you have to slow down. There's no way that, and having worked with people in addiction who are constantly coming back to the first step because they have to admit their powerlessness, because whether it's pornography or a relationship, quote, process addiction, or it's a substance addiction, there's something else has taken over their life. And so the way they know that is that they can't go very long. They can't go, the time between their previous episode and their next episode can only go so long. That's what craving is. So whether it's 12-step or some other therapy, very often it's about pacing between that. So you can lengthen that out and lengthen that out and lengthen that out. And so each of the steps does that from that work. But there's also another level, which is and I'm going back to time and intimacy. You're familiar with transactional analysis. I haven't talked about this, the TA scripts, I'm okay, you're okay, mother scripts, father scripts, you did me wrong is a script. I'm better than you is a script, that we play out in our close relationships. I'm the one who does the dishes and I do everything around here, which is a script that I use quite a bit. And my wife and I go at that. But that's at one level. And whenever there's a script, it's a routine. And whenever there's a routine, there's some type of addiction going on. You're addicted to your viewpoint, that's the addiction, which we don't talk about. But I do like the Jungian perspective because there's also an archescript, because the archetypes are there. So just if we use that one, the archetype of the martyr, that if you look at, Carolyn Miss's work on sacred contracts, great work for this, because you start to realize this is a pattern. Why am I always a martyr? Why am I always being a prostitute in relationships? Why am I, she has a number of relationship archetypes: Don Juan, martyr, prostitute, pimp, these are archetypes. And so you start recognizing that there's a deeper pattern here that has more to do with your soul work. It's not just the script at the TA, transactional analysis level, but there's you guys talk about ancestral patterns, and which is why I feel such a resonance with you guys, because you really unpack that. And some of those patterns are inherited from the family system. And then there's the holoscript, which goes back to Hafez, which is, wait a second, there's a much bigger story going on here. That has to do with what's your purpose on the planet right now. And can you talk to those little, voices in your head and say, hey guys, I get it. I know you want to play martyr right now. Or, hey, I know, my brain is all over the place, but I'm a big fan of Florence and the Machines.
Yep.
And she has a handle on a lot of this. He has this song called King. I want to be king, and it's that archetype is, we don't need to talk about politics and king. But the point is that you start recognizing there's more to this life than my little incy bincy script, which is only functioning in this amount of time. My archescript, which is taking me years to figure out in whatever therapeutic work I've done, to wait, what is my soul's purpose in this planet during this time? So that's the holo, in terms of the hologram or the holographic universe that a number of people have written about. So time, right there, you can see there's like a funnel, right? So this particular script, I do everything around here, well, wait, what's going on there that might be pointing me to something bigger than this? I hope that is not too esoteric. And
No, it's yeah, love it. And yeah, to make it maybe tangible for our listeners, I'm, bringing those scripts in, right? So I think there's a lot of scripts at play, and people, maybe can resonate with some of those archetypes. And I'm wondering, what are some ways we can really begin to shift that level of consciousness of this, of the scripts that we have through the constructed idea of time, and moving outward to our life, and really zoom out to change those stories?
Oh, there's first and foremost having these kinds of conversations with many people. I just did a live podcast, and we had about 10 people on, and we just talked about these ideas and giving people the space to talk about where they are in their life about it. That's the first thing. In our books, we have lots of tools that we use. So the Connoisseur of Time is available at no cost, free download from our website, www.presencequest.life. And I'm not saying these are the be all end all, but the first thing is to recognize that at any given day, this is one exercise. So, and I'll walk through it very quickly. At any given day, your attitude toward time is going to fluctuate. So I'll read 3 statements, and then you could tell me which one you resonate with. And then I'll go to the next place so you can see how this particular exercise works. So as the listeners are listening, you can listen, which of these 3 do you resonate with? So I never have enough time to do what I want. That's statement number 1. I never have enough time to do what I want. Next one. My efforts at managing time are sometimes effective and sometimes not effective. That's the next sentence. And then the next one, number 3, is I'm attracted to the unfolding and fulfillment of my destiny.
I resonate with that one. I do.
Me too. But if I were really honest, there are days when I bump back to the middle one and I'm like, but ultimately, ultimately the last one, but they're like, yeah, sometimes I'm effective with time management, sometimes not. I can bounce back.
Well, see, so those 3 right there, I never have enough time to do what I want to say that is pretty advanced. So I'm going to read you the lowest one. We are all going to die anyway. Why bother setting aside time?
That sounds pretty hopeless.
Yeah, well, I know people who resonate with that.
Yeah, so do I.
So Stacy's question, that's the first, is to do an exercise like that. But then the next part, what is your feeling associated with that statement? So for Stacy, I'm attracted to the unfolding and fulfillment of my destiny. What's the feeling you have with that?
Well, it's really joy, excitement, abundance. I feel like I'm in the flow. Like, and this has really shifted for me over the last couple of years. I've sat with different plant medicines in the last few years, and it's really opened up just my sense of purpose and moving through all kinds of layers of things, and so my sense of purpose that's where I've stepped into, and that's where it keeps unfolding in these most beautiful and magnificent ways. And I don't even feel like I'm working. It's just like this joy, and it's exciting. And that's where I feel like I'm really in flow. So
also effortlessness.
Effortlessness, yes.
Freedom. Like I think of this freedom and expansion.
So expanded, yes.
So let me go, because Brenda did say she goes back to the second one. So what is your feeling about that? My efforts are sometimes effective and sometimes not effective. What feelings do you have around that?
Judgment. There's a lot of judgment and perfectionism, and there's a scarcity mentality in there. Like the not enough-ness creeps up.
Okay. So this is good because first, thank you for being vulnerable. Both of you right there and sharing. So now then there's a next part to this, which is I'm going to read another one, which I'm just going to make the assumption that this is a one that you might aspire to, both of you. So I'll just, for the purposes of this exercise. I am aware of and attracted to timeless and eternal qualities. My truest identity is ultimately beyond time. Am I right that's a resonance but it's maybe not there completely yet.
But I think there are glimpses, like I definitely have glimpses of that higher vibrational statement that you mentioned.
Next time you have a glimpse, call me, please, and tell me.
Yeah.
I need as much of that as I do.
We all do.
Yeah.
Stacy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things. Yeah, as I'm going through my day, um I tend to be really focused on what I'm doing, and then I, forget to kind of zoom out. It's
Yeah.
when I'm, in meditation or really like taking that present moment um throughout the day to really tap into that and to, the eternalness of everything. And but yeah, the human mind, it forgets sometimes momentarily as you're
Yeah. And I think I get those glimpses mostly when I'm out in nature. Like I have to really remove myself from like say Susan mentioning the focus and the to-do list. And like once I can detach from that and time has a whole other different meaning when I'm outside and I'm not connected to a phone or some kind of timepiece or, anything in the familiar world, then time expands and opens. So it's like I get glimpses. I mean, I wish there were more often, but for me, it's usually I have to remove myself from the familiar. And then it's there.
Okay, so this is the next step of the exercise. So we're just working through this exercise, right? The first is just noticing where we are hanging out, noticing the feelings around that, noticing what the aspiration might be or what the higher vibrational resonance is. And then in this particular exercise, we call that the threshold. So that's the threshold. Those glimpses, Brenda, they're glimpses into that doorway. You see, that crossing over that threshold. So when Stacy said zoom out, it's like you're standing in the doorway and you're in your life with the attentional focus that clock time brings, task focused. But there's this doorway that is right there that you can oh, it's there. I can see it. There's light coming from this other place, So it's recognizing recognizing that there's a threshold. So the exercise to make it real, Stacy, and this still might be abstract, but just noticing there's more.
Yeah.
Noticing there's more to the time than just this time, and that there is universal access to the experience of timelessness. That there is time transcendence is a real thing. In fact, in psycho-oncology and in nursing studies and in research on death and dying, these are very much studied concepts in the scientific literature, because that you cannot work with people in hospice and not deal with these issues of timelessness and time transcendence. So and you can look at that literature to find measures of these things and so forth. So it may seem abstract and esoteric, but it's very, very real in those very last stages of life for many people. So now that you know that threshold is there, maybe you don't have to wait till your last days of your life to walk through the threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Living every day like it is, just like I think I think in our culture we try to the idea has been to live your life, work your whole life, then retire, and then, do what you want. But, it's really live your life as you want to, why wait till you're retired to do the things you really want to do? You can do them now. There's plenty of time and space. And, if your heart and your soul are, in alignment, and just, yeah, you can make it happen.
This is where, if you can, you would, at this point in the podcast, you would play the Kenny Loggins song, "This Is It."
Yes. Now is the time.
That is an incredible song, by the way. I mean, because that's a song where his father had a heart attack. And he was, as I remember, I may be not recalling it all, but he said, this is it. The waiting is over, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Because he's trying to tell his father, and it's interesting because I lost my dad a few years ago, and that song, and then the Sting song, All This Time.
All This Time.
By Sting. All this time the river flowed endlessly to the sea. If I had my way, I'd take a boat from the river and bury the old man at sea. And if you listen to the lyrics of both of those songs, it's like, that's what this is sort of like I'm sharing with you. How could I not come to this work? Because, first I talked about pining away, listening to, old, romance songs, that, kept me in my, my pillow. But there's this other music out there that's so soul expanding. And I think my point in bringing up those songs is that this is it. This is it. And we sometimes take that, well, then I better get as much out of it as I can. But if we really look at the role of the whole time, we go, well, wait a second, what's my legacy? What am I going to do here that's going to be for good? And how can I be honorable in that?
I love that sentiment of like, we get to choose our legacy, maybe perhaps a different one from our past, that ancestral healing, and that we get with this gift of time that we all get in this lifetime on this planet. It's a beautiful reminder of that. And this is kind of a great way to start to wrap up this amazing conversation. So please tell our listeners where they can find you and what you're currently working on.
Well, I'm always currently working on this. There's nothing else but this. So no, I think presencequest.life is our website. And as I said, we have a Patreon account that we just started because we're trying to, build a following, and maybe I could learn from you guys because I think you've done pretty well. So that's where you can find and download the Connoisseur of Time at no cost. And we offer workshops, virtual workshops. We're in the middle of one right now. And we welcome people to come to that and to do this work. It's really, it's in those workshops, people pair up in between sessions to have these conversations. And they always come back and say, I found a friend for life. Because once you start having these conversations, you open up in a way that you may not have otherwise opened up, So, and I have a Facebook group. So if you come to the presencequest.life, you'll find that there, and you'll find the book series coming out. We have book 1 is out, but we're going to have a total of 5 books over the next year, all related to this idea. So, but I really appreciate what you guys do as well. And I'm so grateful, and I hope that this resonates with your audience.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Thank you for being with us today and sharing this beautiful space to have this conscious conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
And here at Be the Love podcast, we are so excited about our upcoming Awaken Your Soul Costa Rica retreat on November 6th to the 12th, 2023. And we would love to have you join us for a beautiful and vibration raising experience. Check out the webpage with details and registration in our show notes.
And thank you for listening to Be the Love podcast. If you've enjoyed listening to our show, please share the love by sharing it with your friends and family, giving us a 5-star written review on iTunes, or liking us on Facebook. And please consider supporting our mission to awaken our souls with a monthly donation that helps with the operating costs of this podcast, so we can continue to spread the love. To contribute, visit our Patreon website at patreon.com/Be the Love podcast. And stay tuned for more episodes being released on Mondays at 5:55 a.m. Mountain Time.